So sticking with North Carolina and Bill Belichick here, but switching gears to a bit of an interesting topic here that, we talked about how they're bringing in multiple players here for the 2025 class that we just talked about. There's another group of guys here that we're going to talk about, a trio of lacrosse players, some of the top lacrosse prospects in the country that committed to North Carolina over the weekend, not only to play lacrosse, but also to play for Bill Belichick on the football field, a couple 2025 prospects and a 2026 prospect. So we'll talk about all three of them here in the same segment. But we have to first talk about Belichick's history with lacrosse, his connections and ties to it. Obviously, Chris Hogan, a player that he coached with the Patriots, that he brought over from lacrosse. And just, you look at these guys here, it could potentially lead to a pipeline of lacrosse athletes, as Carolina has a tremendous program on that side of things. But now with what Belichick's trying to do and his ties to the sport, could be a nice opening here for them to bring some really good athletes into the football program.
Yeah, this is so interesting on so many levels. It is something to watch, not just now with this class and these three kids, but going forward. Well documented that Bill Belichick's second favorite sport is lacrosse. All three of his kids played it. He had the lacrosse goal at his house. You look at some of the things he's done internationally. He built a lacrosse field in Uganda, the Bill Belichick field. He wears the Croatia lacrosse hoodie around. You mentioned guys like Chris Hogan, some of the players he's brought in. He played himself at Wesleyan, so he has experience personally with the sport. He says he likes to play catch sometimes just for fun and to unwind from all the stress of being an NFL head coach. So those connections are all well documented. But then you look at the national championship game, right? A guy like Jordan Faison, who's a lacrosse player at Notre Dame, the number one lacrosse program right now in the country, who's also a wide receiver for that Notre Dame team, literally the top of college football, 356 yards this past year. And Faison's from South Florida. That's not necessarily a hotbed for lacrosse, although it's getting better. Shout out to my boy Kurt Lunkenheimer, three-time national champion at Princeton, kind of putting a lot into the programs down here. But North Carolina is close to real lacrosse hotbeds. Talking about Maryland, the Northeast. Bill Belichick's name rings pretty true out there, considering that he is an NFL guy. That's NFL country. So you look at the regions that are either close to North Carolina or within range, you can pluck these two sport athletes and sell them on playing both sports. North Carolina plays in the best lacrosse conference in the ACC. That's a nationally ranked program. And of course, you have a head coach who will welcome two sport athletes. Now you got increased scholarships in football, so you have more flexibility that way. You're not taking one of those limited football scholarships to have a two-sport athlete that you may not be able to have in spring or whatever. So it's a lot easier to stomach having a player like that without sacrificing football-only scholarships. It's just it's an interesting fit. Here's a quote from Notre Dame's lacrosse coach Kevin Corrigan about the combination of skills required to play lacrosse and to play football in the crossover. He says, what wouldn't translate? Changing directions, reading a guy's hips to know when to come out of your break, deception. You're using it to make guys think you're doing one thing when you're really doing another. Those are all traits that you're using on both fields. Forget about the acceleration and stopping and those sort of things. All the athletic traits translate very easily. So Bill Belichick obviously agrees, because you got three guys here, 225, 126, that are going to be playing both sports at the University of North Carolina.
You want to start with the quarterback here, Gary Merrill?
This is my favorite one. So let's just start right there at the top. This is somebody you could see right away competing in the ACC with a role, right? So this is a 6'1", 185-pound senior quarterback, the Gatorade Player of the Year in football, who's also a five-star lacrosse recruit as a two-way midfielder. So he's excellent at both, not just good at both, excellent at both. 1,955 yards rushing, 32 touchdowns. Also passed for a little over 1,700 yards, 19 touchdowns. More of a running quarterback, though, clearly first team All-State. And, man, you could see when you watch his film, a wildcat quarterback on day one. He's got the size of 6'1", 185. He's a little bit of an upright runner, but, man, he does not struggle to break tackles. Guys bounce off him. Then you see a little bit of the speed, right there. He's pulling away from guys from Melville, New York, in Long Island, New York Catholic League. And this guy just dominated, man. I mean, I don't know if he's going to be a receiver, a running back, a tight end, or if he actually trains at quarterback. But this right here is what I think you could have him do right away. Remember, Bill Belichick got Tim Tebow later in his career. Didn't use him because he had a guy named Tom Brady, but you could see him potentially leaning on a wildcat quarterback, particularly in the college level, doing exactly what you're seeing right here, just breaking tackles, beasting, and having some surprising speed as well.
Yeah, we'll let the tape roll for a little bit because there's a few other runs here where he's pulling away from people, and you see them playing at Hofstra there, a big lacrosse program as well. So I mean, this is a guy who, like you said, was a 5-star lacrosse recruit, right? So legitimate big time athlete. You see the change of direction here, and I think there's got to be some sort of package for them to use him in,
especially when you're not great at quarterback next year, which we'll see what happens, but it doesn't look like there's not Drake May, Sam Howell, North Carolina. That's very quarterback centric, at least not next year. So you're going to be trying to find ways to generate offense. And I think this guy, I mean, look, it's crazy for a guy that, I don't think he has a 247 profile page, but Bill Belichick's never been one to do things the normal way. He always looked for little edges.
But this is the Gatorade Player of the Year in the state of New York, which is crazy to me that he doesn't have a 247 page, unless they just thought that he'd go play lacrosse.
Right, and he could throw. I mean, you're seeing him throw here. So if he's a drop back passer, maybe that's not what you need, but he can throw if everybody's in the box. And that right there, that read option, I mean, this is classic wildcat. And then the game-breaking speed, at that level, game-breaking speed. But I would say certainly ACC caliber speed when you combine it with the strength and physicality. So right there, you see? I mean, you could run that if teams get too aggressive, and he'll be able to throw well enough to keep defenses honest. That his main position, what he majors in, who knows? He's a little bit upright to be a running back, perhaps. Maybe a wide receiver is more of a fit. But this right here, I think, translates day one.
Yeah, without a doubt. And you see the red zone as well, a little weapon around the goal line.
I got to see his lacrosse highlights. I'm wondering what this guy can do.
Yeah, with here let me pull up some clips right here. We have a 3-goal performance. I don't think they call them hat tricks in lacrosse. I don't want to sound ignorant.
Yeah, exactly.
Here.
We're not lacrosse experts here, but an athlete is an athlete. And obviously the physicality of the sport of lacrosse, you can see it on the football field when he plays football. He gets that done. But, look, best football player of all time. Many people believe Jim Brown, outstanding lacrosse player, one of the best of his era, anybody you talk to. Also from this area, by the way, I believe Jim Brown is from the New York City area as well. So not saying Gary Merrill is going to be Jim Brown.
You do love your comparisons, but that's about as wild as it gets right there.
But I'm just saying, an interesting player for sure, and he'll definitely help UNC's lacrosse team. And look, maybe this also helps UNC lacrosse, that if someone wants to play both sports, and maybe they don't get that opportunity to say at Notre Dame, like Jordan Faison did, you could have some crossover.
As we keep getting through this trio of lacrosse and football commits here, UNC 910 says that Clower kid's tape is crazy, seemingly top tier speed. And yeah, man, it looks like he's pulling away from people. The track times don't match up with what we saw on tape there, without a doubt.
Yeah, and sometimes that happens, guys. I think he only had one track time listed, so he's probably not a normal 100-meter runner. By the way, if you're watching the standalone clip on the lacrosse kids, we also did a video which is being referenced here by UNC 910 on the other players added to the class of 2025. So a lot of UNC coverage here, man. If you guys like UNC football, like and subscribe to Group Chat Sports. We're so fascinated by what Belichick is doing there. We're covering a lot of their moves because they're all very unorthodox, and the lacrosse factor, I think, is something it's not going to be a one-off, or in this case, a 3-off. It's going to be something you're going to see over time, maybe develop into something that's unique in college football.
Now, the next elite lacrosse prospect that is also going to be playing football at North Carolina, Germaine Anderson, and as Ty Zanders says here, who's a national analyst for Prep Lacrosse, says a top 50 recruit in lacrosse. Germaine Anderson announced he will play for UNC Football, Fredericksburg, Virginia, 6'2", 195, and a guy who plays sort of a linebacker safety role. A lot of clips here in coverage of him dropping back on his huddle that I'm going to pull up right now.
Yeah, a fluid linebacker, right? So another thing about Belichick that he's kind of famous for saying is he hated when scouts told you what a guy couldn't do. He's like, tell me what they can do, and that's how we'll use them. That's really what we like to focus on. And with this kid right here, just watching his highlights, this is what he can do, is cover. There is so much of a need for coverage linebackers. And this guy, again, showing the change of direction from lacrosse, he is someone who, as he continues to develop on the football field, maybe he comes in on obvious passing downs and gives you some size and physicality, but also the ability to cover. There you see him on special teams. Versatility is a hallmark of the Bill Belichick player, ability to contribute in unique ways. And I think with this guy, I think the coverage stands out.
Yeah, no, the speed is really solid for that position. And it's someone who, again, you get him now in the North Carolina weight room program and stuff like that. I mean, 195 right now with his frame could become 215. Obviously he's got to play lacrosse too, so we got to see what sort of how the weight changes affect the lacrosse as well. I'm sure that will all be part of the discussions here. But in terms of the football, I mean, adding weight should be a pretty easy thing for him. And you keep some of that twitchiness as well. And you got at the very least, you got a guy who I think can be an impact player on special teams immediately.
Yeah. And look, a lot of times with young linebackers,
that's how they break through.
100%. And a lot of times the coverage part is where they struggle, right? Usually that's something you teach in school. But he's got that already. So very interesting player. If you showed me this football tape and said that this was a late addition to the class, I wouldn't have second guessed it. Which is why it's so interesting that these guys are lacrosse players, because the football only part of it is certainly more than credible.
And now the third and final lacrosse prospect here that we're going to talk about, who's actually for the 2026 class. So these first two players, Gary Merrill and Germaine Anderson, will be additions for the 2025 class. But this next one here in Crew Davis is a 2026 recruit. And as I pull up his commitment here, he committed yesterday afternoon. Guy from Iona Prep in New York, and you see him here in the picture, man. He's got a good build to him, and I'll pull up the highlights here in just a second.
Yeah, and spoke to some sources in the New Rochelle area. Said excellent football player, a lot of versatility for this kid. Like you mentioned, class of 26. Similar area. I mean, this is New York City suburb, so not that far from where Merrill played his high school ball, and an area where you could see North Carolina making more of an impact. We talked before about the defensive tackle from Brooklyn. So this is an area, Deuce Thomas, right? So we're getting more players from the New York City area coming into North Carolina. This is just another, and you see some speed there with this guy. Is he going to be a running back? Is he going to be, slot receiver? Is he going to be a defensive player? Is he going to be a special teams contributor? I mean, who knows? But clearly at the high school level, very, very productive as a running back.
Yeah, without a doubt. I mean, the burst, I see a lot of burst, man. I mean, is this a guy who could maybe play some linebacker? I don't know. But usually a guy like this is so productive offensively. It's going to be hard to convince him to play on the other side of the ball.
Yeah, 10.6 yards per carry. Also caught 52 passes for 728 yards, 7 touchdowns. So the guy can do both in terms of running and catching the ball. State championship game, 17 carries, 336 yards, 3 touchdowns. So the guy is clutch, tough runner. I think probably more straight line than lateral with him, but he does have speed. And here you see him. I mean, this is where he could really make an impact. I don't want to make the easy Danny Woodhead comparison because he's a white running back playing for Bill Belichick. But, when you're not the biggest guy in the world, you got to catch the football, and he's doing that.
No, he's got burst. Like you said, it is a bit straight line, but man, I mean, he's when he sees a little bit of a hole, 10.6 yards a carry. Obviously, we see he's busting off a lot of big runs, but that acceleration in the first few steps is evident on his tape.